Greetings everyone, Colonel Thompson here. Today I'm going to talk about one of our core values, service before self. Service means a lot to me. I recently hit my 20-year mark and my whole Air Force life has been defined by 9/11. In fact, I was on my way to pilot training when it happened. It was certainly a day when all of our lives changed forever. So many of us have served overseas, whether in Afghanistan and CENTCOM, in SOUTHCOM, or PACOM. We all embody service before self in our jobs. But let's pause a moment and consider service here at home. What can we do here to help our partners, our community, and our families be successful, feel loved, and part of the team? During this month of service, take the time to reflect and consider the following. What does service before self mean to you? What does this look like in our daily lives? This weekend marks the 20th year anniversary of 9/11, and it also marks our departure from Afghanistan. How do these anniversaries highlight the core value of service before self? What are some things we can do to support those affected by these events? Describe a time when someone else's decision to put service before self helped you. As I reflect on these questions, I think a lot about how, as the most deployed wing in the Air Force, you and your family's service is one that we should continually celebrate. I want to thank our Compass Call family. They've been deployed for 18 years straight. That's an incredible and extraordinary length of time. I also want to thank our RJ and Variant families for always being ready. You are always on the road, fighting or showcasing our tremendous capabilities. I recently deployed with wonderful selfless leaders who are part of this wing. Colonel Chris Backus, Staff Sergeant Thomas Campbell, Lieutenant Colonel Cameron Mayer, Captain Emily Wagemaker, and Master Sergeant Sierra Blake. These humans know the meaning of service and gladly raise their hands to serve in the toughest of areas and in the toughest of circumstances. And lastly, I want to thank our teams at the OLs. Although they are away from us geographically, they are always in our thoughts. Thank those in your lives at work, at home, and across the community who have helped us to do what we do. They've sacrificed time and time again, and they certainly make us all proud.
The morning of September 11th, 2001 dawned like any other. However, the events that would eventually unfold would change our nation and the world forever. At 8:46 a.m. Eastern Time, American Airlines Flight 11 crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City. A little over 15 minutes later, United Airlines Flight 175 crashed into the South Tower. At 9:37, the Pentagon was attacked when American Airlines Flight 77 crashed into the western facade of the building. Finally, at 10:07, hijackers intentionally crashed Flight 93 into a field outside Shanksville, Pennsylvania, when the crew and passengers attempted to wrest control from the hijackers. By 10:28, both of the Twin Towers had collapsed. In total, 2,996 Americans lost their lives that day in New York City, Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and at the Pentagon. The attack remains the deadliest terrorist act in world history. In 2001, the 55th Wing already had a presence in Southwest Asia, which it had maintained since the First Gulf War. In the opening days of what would become the global war on terrorism, the men and women of the 55th Wing employed combat air power downrange. 20 years later, we are still supporting efforts in theater, ensuring that America and its allies are safe from the threat of international terrorism and violent extremism. More than just a logistical and mission-centric triumph, the conflict that was ignited by September 11th has touched the lives of men and women across the globe and here at the 55th Wing.
In September 2001, I was in pilot training at Offutt Air Force Base, and I graduated pilot training on the 10th of September. I had my newly minted wings on my chest, and almost my entire class and I watched the second plane fly into the second tower live. And at that point, we knew this is no accident. This is an act of terror, an act of war. And sure enough, coming to Offutt to fly the RC-135, we were thrust straight into a wartime environment. You know, the many deployments I've taken to Afghanistan with many of my crewmates, everything was defined by that moment in which we saw the second plane hit the second tower on 9/11.
It was basically the first, I guess, say, conflict of my career, basically, and it's lasted my entire career. I remember some details of that day, right? We were out there on the flight line. We got word that basically planes had hit buildings in New York, and basically America was under attack. Our leadership came out and were saying, hey, there's a plane inbound to Offutt. We don't know what it is. It was kind of an intense situation, especially for a young airman like myself at the time, and then we realized it was Air Force One. Wow, this was the first or second stop after a huge national emergency was to Offutt. It put a whole new emphasis on the importance of Offutt as a strategic asset to national defense.
Engine 101, did it crash over there in the Pentagon? Is that correct?
When the Pentagon got hit, that told me the game just got much, much bigger. Now it's a direct attack, not only on the U.S., but now the military. That's when it really, really hit me.
So I was halfway through seminary and just really struggling with what I was supposed to do in terms of ministry and so forth. And September 11th happened, and I was so distraught. I wanted to do something, and I was just torn with what to do. And it was about 3 days after 9/11, and I remember extremely clearly. It was just divine direction came to me, and it was very obvious, and I was supposed to become a chaplain in the United States Air Force. September 11th had a profound impact on me, and in the midst of such great evil, we see all these amazing stories of great good coming out of something so horrible.
So when the events of 9/11 happened, I was only 2 years old, so I don't really remember it when it actually happened. So the way that I learned about it was through school and teachers and videos and whatnot. And then when I was 12 years old, that's when Osama bin Laden was killed by Navy SEALs. And after that, they came out with the documentary, and that's when I knew that I wanted to be in the United States military. And I'm very proud to be part of the military, even though I'm not personally boots on the ground. I know that what I do affects our mission and helps the United States fight against terrorism.
On September 11th, I was 17 years old. I was in high school, was in my science class, and it was a normal day for me. And they turned on the TV, and I think everything just kind of changed at that point.
2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center.
I remember that they ended up having to turn off the TVs because, folks were so scared in those buildings, they were on fire. So, people were jumping out. Sorry. It was the saddest thing. I think anybody who's come into the service since then, if you weren't already wearing the uniform, that's a big part of it, wanting to serve. It's important that you're here, I think, to continue with the mission and to make sure that things like that never happen.
We were a few days from graduation from Airman Leadership School. It was our last uniform inspection, so we were all in our blues. About mid-morning, had an airman from another class burst open into our classroom and shout, a plane just crashed into the World Trade Center.
And again, unconfirmed report that a plane has crashed into one of the towers there.
So the role that we had was responsible for providing the Defense Red Switch Network comm support for the President. So they started preempting services to give the President maximum capability for his teleconference. But then to learn, on that day that, wow, we have a system here that the President of the United States is relying on to make some really important decisions. And one of the messages that I've carried, based on that experience alone from 20 years ago, don't think for 1 minute what you do is not important to our national security.
A day of loss and chaos, the attacks of September 11th threatened to shake our national resolve. But rather than crush our spirit, we saw Americans rise with heroism, heart, and hope. The actions of those who ran toward danger instead of away are an example critical to remember, to celebrate, and to impart on future generations.
I remember when my wife and I, we had been in Okinawa. We had just gotten to Kadena a few weeks prior to this, and it was an evening time, and we had just moved into our house off base, and we had no television. All we had was a small transistor radio, and it was just really inconceivable of what was happening. We couldn't picture in our minds what it meant for the towers to go down, and that was kind of a time for me to reflect on taking my oath of enlistment and what that meant. I remember walking into the recruiter's office and seeing the core values and what did that mean, service before self. And I will tell you, the individuals, when it comes to serving our nation, it doesn't mean that you have to wear the uniform. We have all kinds of individuals that support and defend the Constitution. Even our civilian counterparts, we know that we can't do what we do without the help of our civilians. We ask you on this September 11th to reflect on your time in the military, but reflect on the oath that you took. Whether you're an enlisted member, whether you're an officer or civilian, reflect on what it means to defend the Constitution of the United States. I ask you to think about those that are deployed and the family members that are overseas, that this might be their first time away from home. Thank you for what you do to support and defend not only the United States, but our allied nations and our partners across the globe. Because of what we do each and every day, we can rest at night knowing that we're all safe.